What is that?
It's orange iguanas. You got to Google. It's hard to explain.
Okay. Just for you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I almost said morning, but I'm going to go with afternoon. Everybody, we are back. We've had a little break, but I hope you didn't forget about March Madness because it's still in full swing and the Sweet 16 is here. We are ready to kick it back off. We've got 4 games today. We've got 4 games tomorrow. That means a lot of money up for grabs. I am Ben Rasa. I bring with me my partner in crime, Matt Gajewski. Are you ready to pick up some basketball after a much-needed rest?
Yeah, Ben, I'm really excited. I actually had some trouble sleeping last night just thinking about these games. A couple of heaters on deck, so I'm pumped.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's a little, don't make like you weren't busy. I saw you sweating the CBI and the NIT and all sorts of things during the week. So no days off for you. I've been in the NBA streets. I'm excited to be back here, though. These games, to me, this is one of the best rounds of the entire tournament.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We have some Cinderellas. We have a lot of high-seeded teams that are now in competitive matchups. You know, there's not these 16 one-seed games we have to talk about. So everything's competitive, and it's going to be a lot of fun to break down.
No doubt about it. Before we dive in, though, I want to say our friends, Monkey Knife Fight, hanging with us, traveling with us, sponsoring the show once again. And if you haven't gone there, their player prop-based contest, easy to play, not a massive time commitment that the other sites kind of require. And it's not just, basketball, not just the NBA, UFC, PGA, esports, soccer. Monkey Knife Fight has all of them. Get started. Go over to monkeyknifefight.com. Choose what game you want to play, the buy-in level, all the usual things, and use the promo code Awesemo. You're going to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $50. So make sure to go check that out. But let's dive in here. Chad, it's good to see everybody. We got some of the good, some of the best in there. We're going to start from the top right. We have 4 games, so we have the luxury of being able to really dive in here. So we'll go with Nova, 7.5-point dogs. They're going up against the 1 seed in Baylor, 142 total. And we'll start with how Villanova got here. I think a lot of people thought Winthrop was a trendy 12 pick. Ultimately, I thought Villanova handled them well. And right before we went live, you said to me, and it's hard to argue, that North Texas in the second round just simply didn't have their legs after that game against Purdue. So Villanova has looked strong. Where do you see them kind of, where are they at? We know Gillespie, that was a huge loss at point guard. So what do you see with the Wildcats heading into this game?
Yeah, so they're a dangerous team, especially with time to prep against Baylor. And they're a team that's going to slow the pace, try to bring this to a crawl, add some volatility because of that. Baylor is a team that plays slightly above average as far as possessions per game, though. So Villanova is going to mitigate that. And then Villanova is going to try to shoot a lot of threes. So Baylor is fairly strong on defense. They rank 22nd in defensive efficiency, but they do have a weakness against opposing 3-point shots. Baylor's a team that will try to turn you over. They actually force a ton of turnovers here, but Villanova is very secure with the ball. So I don't see that really being an issue for Villanova. And I think they're just going to try to shoot. They already shoot a ton of threes, and they're shooting over 35% from 3. They did lose Gillespie, which is a huge loss for the team, but they still have Daniel shooting over 40%. Justin Moore, I think, is a regression candidate. He shot around 40% last year. He's down around 32 this year. So that's their path, in my opinion.
It's funny because I wasn't really on Nova in any situation. I thought Purdue would be playing in this game. But when you look at it, I actually think it's a decent matchup. You mentioned they want to slow the tempo, and they're a high variance team because they really shoot a lot of threes. So when you're playing that style, it doesn't take much if you can shoot an unreasonable clip. I just want to ask you, you just mentioned don't really turn the ball over. Do you think that will hold true even without their true point guard?
I think so here. It's hard to say because they've played now basically 4.5 games without him, but some of that isn't against the best competition. You talked about Winthrop in game 1. That was definitely nothing that scared you. And then they drew North Texas instead of Purdue. So it's still kind of hard to say, but they've done a good job so far.
No, they absolutely have. And it remains to be seen really what Baylor can cause. I worry a little about the inside presence, but Baylor's got so many guards as well. Let's dive into the pricing. You've talked about that some of these guys are ready, but you kick things off. Clearly, if they win, Robinson Earl is going to have to be huge. He's played big. He is just a solid player. 8,500 though. I mean, I know this is the first game, and we'll dive into it more, but what do you see about that salary just on face value?
I think he's a good contrarian play. I don't think I'm touching him in low risk contests, cash contests because of price. And then they have a very low total. It's around 67 points. But if you're talking about JRE from a GPP perspective, he plays every single minute. Without Gillespie, the offense has been forced to just have to run through him. He's taking over 25% of the shots, 27% of the rebounds, and even 32.5% of the assists since Gillespie's been out, which is just huge usage for him. He also draws, I think, the weaker matchup just on the boards. We've seen Baylor have issues with rebounding in the past, and even against Wisconsin in their last game. Some of the Wisconsin bigs were able to out-rebound Baylor here. Even more of an issue if someone like Vital gets in foul trouble, which he's been known to do at times. So I think he's a great contrarian play, JRE that is. I'm willing to look at him in tournaments.
Just to work down, because, yeah, you mentioned the price, but another guy who's going to, I'm not going to say this is going to happen, but it feels like if Villanova is going to have some presence in that front court, Samuels has taken a big step up. 15-9 against North Texas, 11-7, contributed in multiple areas against Winthrop. He's playing a lot of minutes north of 30s expected here. 7,100. Is that getting closer to you in terms of playability?
Samuels, I think, is kind of priced out of play for me just at 7,100. We haven't talked about any of the other games on this slate, but he's near players like Jared Butler, and that's just an easy decision for me. I would rather go down to somebody like Justin Moore, who's 6,100. It's just a slightly more palatable price, and Justin Moore actually has a better usage rate. So I love Samuels. He's actually taken on a ton of usage, over 21% of the shots, rebounds, and assists in their last 3 games, but it's more of a price thing with him than anything else.
And then we look, we've mentioned obviously the bigs, the guards are going to have to step up, and they have. I mean, Moore's at 61, Daniels at 43. Are you looking to these guys? I mean, really, those are the other, then we get to the cheapies.
I think Moore is going to be popular. He was already fairly involved in the offense before Gillespie went down. 17% usage rate for him. He takes a ton of shots, up above 19% in their last 3. He's actually been more involved with his assist rate as well, too. That's at 21% last 3. But because of his price, I think he'll be a little more popular than both JRE and Jermaine Samuel. So for tournaments, I don't mind fading him, but he is the best price-adjusted projection on the slate for this team.
Anything else that you really want to talk about for Nova, or do you want to flip it to the other side?
I thought we might get some value plays for Nova, but instead of condensing their rotation, they've kind of expanded it and taken a committee approach to replacing Gillespie. So everybody else is kind of just doesn't get enough minutes to really consider, in my opinion.
On the other side, I mean, I can't trust Baylor. I never trust Baylor. I was just complaining before the show. But you know what? So far, so good. It doesn't matter what they did against Hartford. They looked solid against Wisco. That was your favorite bet last week. They were just in full control, and it's a team effort. They've got a lot of guys, and the pricing reflects that. I mean, you look for number 1 seed. They don't have, Robinson Earl is the most expensive player in this game. You've got Mitchell at 75, Butler at 74, Teague at 64, and then a couple guys in the 5s. I mean, is that how Baylor does it? What do you make of a team that kind of contributes like this?
Against the spread, I think Baylor has advantages, but it's just a little rich. For DFS, it's the most egregious price I think we've seen on Butler in recent memory. So he's playing every single minute when he's not in foul issues. He easily has the best usage rate on the team. He's sitting at 23%. Machio Teague has the second best usage rate. That's at 18.5%. So he's a pretty sizable advantage there. His role hasn't changed either. So he struggled a little bit down the stretch, but if you look at his rates compared last 3 games versus season long, they're actually not any different. His shot rate's actually up 0.5%, and then his assist rate is right on par with where it's been all season. So the role remains constant for Jared Butler, but just because we've seen some other players step up in big games, his price is down now. So he's easily the best price-adjusted play in this entire game, if not the entire slate.
So looking at that, I mean, do you think on it, because we're talking about a shorter slate now, we went from a ton of games to a decent amount of games to a 4-game slate here. Are you looking possibly to have 2 Baylor players in a lineup, Butler and another guard? Or do you think it's really, he's the priority from this team and you're not looking to cannibalize production?
I think you could get to somebody like Teague. He's playable at his price. Teague is basically just a shooter. He's taking 22% of the shots last 3, but his minutes are still really secure. The usage rate for him is good. It's the second highest on the team among the players that are getting 30+ minutes a game. As far as Davion Mitchell and Jared Butler go, I do think you're taking on some opportunity costs just because there's that Arkansas Oral Roberts game where you get a ton of studs, and that's the game I'm really looking to load up. So I don't mind it. I think you're getting a lot of leverage if you do play Teague or Davion Mitchell, but at the same time, I'm probably just going to lock Butler.
And then anything in terms of value there, or are you sticking kind of with the main, cogs of this Baylor team?
I've heard a lot of people talk up Matt Mayer, but he's now 5,400. He just took a ton of shots in their last game against Wisconsin. He was hitting them at a pretty good clip. He's going to play 20 to 25 minutes. I think there's better value, more secure value on the slate than Matt Mayer. So he's kind of out of play for me.
Anything from this game in the betting market? I appreciate that super chat. We absolutely are going to get to our best bets of the day after we work through these games. This is not my best bet of the day. I'm not touching this game.
So I hit this really, really early in the week. I got the over at 139. It's now at 142. And where it currently stands, I actually kind of like the under more than anything else. So I knew this was going to steam up.
You're going to middle it? I like it.
I'm not going to bet it again because I already hit the over. But when I ran my model, it had the over like a couple points higher. And I knew this was going to steam up. So I just hit it instantly. But Villanova is going to play this game so slow. And Villanova does not turn the ball over. That's how Baylor gets a lot of their production. So if anything, I think it probably plays to the under. But if you're betting this right now this morning, I think it's probably stay away.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, 7.5 for me. If I had to bet the game, I guess I would lean to Baylor because on paper, I think they really can clamp down and mitigate and speed Nova up to an extent. I was saying to you, Baylor had a little run there in a 3-year stretch. They went to the Elite Eight twice. And then I looked at the games. They didn't play a single-digit seed in either of those years. So they haven't exactly burned it up when they've got their chance. Now, this is by far the best team that Scott Drew has had. There's no doubt about it. We'll see what they're made of today and then ultimately maybe against Oral Roberts on Monday. But that's neither here nor there. Let's go to that game now. This is going to, the 15-seed Oral Roberts, 11.5-point dogs against the 3-seed Arkansas. So the winner of this will take on the winner of the game we just talked about. 158 total. So clearly this is going to be a little up and down. You mentioned before the show, these teams played during the year, which is, just a stroke of random luck, considering it's the Summit versus the SEC, not exactly a lot of crossover there. Do you take anything before we dive into teams? Do you take anything from that, or is it just a random occurrence?
I don't think either teams showed a ton that was different from what we saw in the whole body of work. Like Oral Roberts really struggled rebounding, but they've struggled rebounding all year. They're outside the top 300 in offensive and defensive rebounds. And we saw that manifest against Arkansas, completely just out rebounded this team. So I don't think it was too different than what we've seen over the full body of work from either team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, to me, listen, it's a data point, but it's one of many. I'm not going to look at that game and say, oh, well, this is what's going to happen. These teams evolve. A lot has changed. It's a tournament setting, but I was saying to you, Arkansas whipped them on the boards, and we're going to talk about that in a second. I am a little concerned there. But, we've seen Oral Roberts now. They've got past Ohio State. They held on against Florida. They've got the highest scorer in the country in estimates, but O'Banner has been absolutely fantastic in these games. He has played all 85 minutes. So he's averaging north of 40 minutes a game, which is in theory impossible. He's not coming off the court. His price, though, is up to $8,900. He is the most expensive player on this team. Do you think that is warranted, or is it just too much of an overreaction?
I think it's warranted, but it does come with opportunity cost just because of the other teams and players we have on the slate. Like Jared Butler's price is egregious. I think you play Butler over these guys. We haven't talked about the Arkansas guys yet, but they're much cheaper. So you have a guy like A. Smith. He has a 22% usage rate, plays every minute. O'Banner, it's basically the same thing. His usage rate has been absurd the last 3 games. He's taking 26.5% of the shots and 37% of the rebounds. Those are just downright silly numbers. But at the same time, if you look over to Arkansas, you have players like Justin Smith and Moses Moody. Maybe their usage rate isn't quite as good, but you're getting over 10 points in implied team total. You're getting every single minute from those players. So I think it might be just worth it to go down and try to play 2 of the Arkansas studs, mix in a Jared Butler there rather than pay all the way up for an A. Smith or an O'Banner and then have to take a stars and scrubs approach.
Do you think that there's any merit to still trying to get exposure to this Oral Roberts team outside of their the 1-2 punch they have with one of these guys? Because after them, you're talking about a $3,400 discount to Thompson and the rest of kind of the role players.
Yeah, the good thing about them, they play a hyper condensed rotation, tight distribution of minutes. So Thompson, Jurgens, they're going to play almost every single minute. They obviously leave a little bit to be desired just with their statistics. So much of that comes through A. Smith and O'Banner. But both of those players are fine when you adjust their rates for 35 to 40 minutes. Jurgens, for example, he has an 18% rebound rate and 23% assist rate. I think he's even playable with a guy like Asmus because so much of his stats come in the periphery, and Asmus is such an excellent scorer. So I'm definitely interested in Jurgens and Thompson as pure value plays.
Would you go lower than that in terms of like Lasis as a pun, or even this may be too much, but someone like Weaver?
I don't think so. Their minutes are going to be right around 20. And with Jurgens and Thompson, you can almost guarantee they're going to be 35 plus.
On the other side, so Arkansas is a team that, some people not on this show liked Colgate, and it looked for a couple minutes like that might be a thing, and then it just wasn't. Texas Tech didn't understand why they were underdogs, competitive game, but they survived, and now they're here. You mentioned Moody 78, Justin Smith 77. Let's start there. You see a big difference between the two with just $100 difference in price?
I think there's a big difference as far as matchup goes. As far as usage goes, I don't think it's drastically different, especially last three. You've actually seen Justin Smith a little bit more involved than Moody, but Justin Smith draws far and away the better matchup playing on the interior. We kind of hinted at this already. Oral Roberts just can't rebound. Again, outside the top 300 in offensive and defensive rebounds. When we saw these teams play earlier, Justin Smith just absolutely had the game of his life. Arkansas had 58 total rebounds in that game, and it doesn't appear that Oral Roberts has gotten any better. They gave up 49 to Ohio State. Florida wasn't much better. So he just has a standout matchup on the interior, and he's played 39 minutes in 3 straight games. Usage rate for him, it includes a 21% shot rate, 23.5% rebound rate, and even a 13.5% assist rate. So he's getting involved everywhere. Moody's just ceded a little bit of usage now that this team is fully healthy.
Yeah, you mentioned 58 to 32 in a rebound. These are the data points. Certainly, if you're backing Arkansas, you're going to cite from the first game. 58 to 32 in a rebounding edge. Arkansas was 4 of 24 from 3, 16%, and they won the game by 11. Now, to speak to the other side, Oral Roberts was 8 of 29. That's no good. They were 75% from the line, which is not a disaster by any stretch, but normally they do shoot a little better than that. They just need to not get absolutely crushed on the boards today. That is priority number one. You've talked about the bigs. What about Note? What about Davis, Tate? What about the backcourt for the Razorbacks?
I think they're all in play because the team total is just enormous here. And we didn't touch on this, but Oral Roberts does not have a good defense. They rank 274 in defensive efficiency. They're particularly bad against guarding the 3. They rank 230 there. And Arkansas overall as a team, they're not a bad three-point shooting team. They shoot relatively well. Moody himself shoots 37% from beyond the arc. They do like to score at the rim a little bit more, but I think they can exploit that matchup. And then Arkansas is also just a bigger team. So a player like Jalen Williams coming back from injury, he didn't play in the conference tournament. In his debut, just 5 minutes for him against Colgate, but then in their last game starts and plays 28. He gives them a lot of height as well. So I think he's interesting as a value play. Devontae Davis is probably the second most mispriced play on the slate behind Jared Butler. He's played 37, 33, and 35 minutes in 3 straight games, and he's actually been very involved. 17% shot rate, 18% rebound rate, 24% assist rate. Literally involved everywhere, and he's a cheaper attachment to this team total. I even think you could get to Note as the 6th man. Jalen Tate, he's played 31 minutes at least in 2 straight. I think any of these 6 Arkansas players are firmly in play.
But besides them, really no reason to reach, super low to the depths.
No, so once you get beyond Jalen Williams, the next most minutes came from Desi Sills, and he played 3. So just a hyper condensed rotation for Arkansas in that Texas Tech game.
Yeah, that's not going to get it done. All right, let's look at this game just a little from the betting side of it. We've mentioned, what did you get it at? Because we're on different sides. I bet Oral Roberts at 11.5. I assume you got a slightly better number.
I took Arkansas at 11.
Okay, so maybe we'll middle, even though that's not possible. 158 total. Anything on the over-under here?
I don't think on the over-under. I think you could maybe look at the over just because both these teams play fast with solid offensive efficiency. But my good friend Steve, shout out to him, he's in the chat. He brought up betting Arkansas live. He called me dumb when I took it at -11 right away and asked me why I didn't just wait to bet this live, because Arkansas has gotten down by a ton of points in a lot of their games this year. He brought up they've been down by double digits in both their first round games. And then in 10 of 24 of their wins, they've been down by 6 or more in the first half. So it's an Arkansas team that you can hit live. I hit them live against Colgate, hit them live against Texas Tech, which has been a very profitable strategy. And they actually even covered the initial spread in those games. So looking at Arkansas live, I'll probably honestly double down my bet if they go down again in this game, but just an interesting data point that they've had a tendency to start out slow.
And just to speak to the other side, as an Oral Roberts backer, I may unload some if this game, which is going to be up and down, you may have some middling opportunities if you want to try to take that route. If they start fast, you can grab Arkansas live and have the best of both worlds potentially. Any other props? Chat talking about some of them right now. You've mentioned a couple. You have a free article up, so you can go check that out over at awesemo.com. But is there any from this game that really catch your eye, either team?
If you could hit these earlier in the week, Justin Smith had an egregious 7.5 rebound prop. Just based on conservative projections, he projects for 9.5, and there's a solid chance he gets like 15. But a lot of value has been sucked out of that. I looked prior to the stream and I was seeing at 9.5. If you can still get it at like 8.5 or 7.5, like I would max bet that instantly. Devontae Davis, his prop was egregiously low too. Saw him at 10.5 points. And again, he's played 32 minutes at least in the last 3 games. He easily projected for 13 points, so a 3-point difference in prop. Those are my 2 favorites. So if you can still get Justin Smith somewhere below 8.5 or 7.5 rebounds, I would jump on that instantly.
Yeah, I gotta step my. I have not gotten to many props. College props are a little difficult. It's hard to find these lines. Yeah, but if you can get them, absolutely, they are not efficient. I've been in the depths betting horrible things this morning, and I did not find many props that were still there. But yeah, as you mentioned, that rebounding prop, particularly, you can find that absolutely a go. So this is the top right region. Ultimately, I assume you think we're just going to see Baylor and Arkansas?
I do think that, yes. I picked Arkansas for the Final Four, so very much cheering for the Razorbacks.
I did, and then for some insane reason, I went with Purdue. Big mistake, one of many in my bracket this year, but that's neither here nor there. All right, before we move on to the next game, I do have to shift focus, as Nightbot has told me. MLB, it starts immediately. Who knew? April 1st. That is opening day, and we have a massive deal for you here. You can get 9 days of Awesemo Plus MLB for just $9 with the promo code STARTING9. So the word starting with the number 9 attached. Starting with the number 9. It literally says it. I could have just read that. This gives you access to everything we have here for DFS, in player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, lineup builder, and of course, premium Slack, which is worth its weight in gold. A lot of characters in there. The offer is valid through April 9th. No reason not to give this a try. Obviously, the team here, fantastic at baseball. You will not be seeing me anywhere near it, which is a good thing for you guys. Just some really fantastic tools that we're excited to get into. So in addition to everything we've got going on the hoop side, don't forget about baseball. Anything else from this first quadrant, first region, or do you want to go to the bottom right, which is to me the most fascinating situation we have in this bracket?
Yeah, I think some of the secondary props are interesting too, like Justin Smith's points, Moses Moody's points. They're just going to score so much that they're a little bit underpriced, not as egregious as that rebound prop. And I think Jalen Williams is even interesting with his rebound prop if you can find it around 5.5. But basically, Arkansas is underpriced across the board in the prop market.
Yeah, and that's something, like I said, we definitely want to take advantage. And as these games whittle down, less teams become available, you can really hone in on some props. I've been doing that. We started in college football with some props this year, and now Zach Wilson's throwing the ball 70 yards on a rope during his pro day. So it all comes full circle. Here we go. Yeah, I knew you'd like that. Midwest region, the number 1 seed has been eliminated. They were absolutely dismantled. That feels like months ago. From Loyola, the 8 seed, the Loyola Ramblers, 7-point favorite here against the 12 seed Oregon State. A very methodical game expected, 125 total. So that's the first thing I actually want to get to. These teams are 2 of the slowest in pace. We know Loyola plays that pack line-esque defense, very slow, very efficient. What do you see? Do you think that total is warranted, that this game could really be played in maybe the high 50s, low 60s?
Yeah, absolutely. Both teams are going to try to slow it down. Loyola's phenomenal in their defensive efficiency. They're 4th in the entire country, and they're good across the board. So I do see it playing to a very low score here. At 125, though, I'm probably not touching the total in the betting markets, but just another indication that this is going to be a bit of a grinder game.
No doubt about it. I'm not touching the total either. We'll get to a bet. This is my favorite bet of the day. And it kind of relates to total, I guess, but Loyola Chicago, listen, what is there to say? 71-58 over Illinois, and they were just clearly the better team. They dismantled them. They were out, Porter Moser ran circles around Underwood. That was one of the many disappointing things as an Illinois backer. Krutwig, what can you say about him? 8,300. He's the do everything. Minutes pushed up to 33 against Illinois. What do you make of him in this spot? Is he in the Robinson Earl category for you, or are you just looking to guys like we just talked about, whether it's Moody or Smith, for a discount?
Unlike Robinson Earl, he doesn't play every single minute, so you're looking at around 30. He's played a little bit north of that since the tournament started. He's not quite as involved. You're seeing rates north of 25% basically across the board for Robinson Earl. Krutwig's shot rate is pretty high. It's 24%, 30% rebound rate, but that's still below Jeremiah Robinson Earl in both categories. I do think you have an easier matchup for Krutwig overall in this game because Oregon State's major weaknesses on the interior. They rank 239 on interior defense. So Krutwig, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he has one of these big games, but the total is really low. I'm just not sure there's a lot of scoring output here to pay for somebody that's 8,300.
I want to talk a little about this Oregon State team because you mentioned their front court. Were you surprised to see what they did to Oklahoma State on the boards? 52-32 against that game in the second round.
Yeah, I was extremely surprised. I had a lot of confidence in Oklahoma State on the glass too, and it was just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that's really thrown me because everyone, including me, I like them against Tennessee, but they were shooting such an outrageous clip from three. I said when that regresses, it could be problematic. Well, they were 6 of 20 against Oklahoma State, and it really didn't seem to matter. They were absolutely phenomenal. Oklahoma State couldn't shoot at all, but they crushed them on the boards. And I guess my question is, do you trust, we know Krutwig, but other than him, is there any bigs for Loyola that you really trust?
Not really. Loyola's kind of a smaller team. There is a little bit of a size mismatch here. But at the same time, we haven't seen Oregon's bigs play that well this season. So similar to, you mentioned their 3-point shooting, which I do agree with you. I think we talked about it. We said this is going to regress. They were shooting like 10% above their season average in the Pac-12 tournament. And then we did see it regress. Similar, I do think the rebound rate regresses here as well.
Regression all over the place. Sticking though with Loyola before we turn it over to the Beavers, is someone like Lucas Williamson in play, 5,500? I mean, will he be tasked? Kind of just a I don't want to say a gadget player. He's on the court for a lot, contributes in several areas, but this is such a methodical team in a slow pace. Is there just not enough stats to go around to justify these tags, or are these guys in play?
That's mostly it. I don't have a ton of interest in the 5K options like Braden Norris and Williamson. I think you can get better options on Oral Roberts like Jurgens, who plays every single minute, but then you have almost like 15 points in team total on these players, Williamson and Norris. I think maybe like a Keith Clemens because he's 4K flat, but even that seems a little bit rich. And you're looking at some pretty significant opportunity costs. And just to kind of back up those numbers we talked about with Loyola and their advantages, how they match up against Oregon State. You talked about rebounding. Loyola, I didn't even bring this up. Loyola is a good rebounding team. They average over 32 per game, which is pretty solid here. So I think just with Krutwig's presence alone, that's going to be difficult for Oregon State. And then as far as just their defensive matchup goes, they're not going to allow Oregon State to shoot a ton of threes, which is problematic if that's how they're getting through the Pac-12 tournament in these early games.
So that's the one interesting. I mean, there was a lot of things that surprised me against Illinois, but the most surprising was what Loyola did on the boards. They held their own. They actually out-rebounded them, and that was truly impressive. But from the DFS side, I mean, it looks like you're kind of saying the pace is really dictating everything here. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and so if you're running one lineup or playing cash, low-risk contests, I would X out the game. If you're playing tournaments, there's interest in guys like Krutwig and Ethan Thompson as studs, maybe some of the value guys, but at most, I think you're just taking one player from this game.
And this is just, I'm going to kind of ask this for every team, but this is just another team there are no 3K cheapies that you could look to.
Unfortunately, no. There's been a couple people talking up our Ugwak, who's 3.8K. He plays 20 minutes a game. His rates are horrific. He has a sub 10% usage rate. So he doesn't pay off this price based on minutes. He doesn't pay it off based on usage. I'm not sure how people are getting to him.
Is there a reason, not that we need to go down this, but he used to, and I watch a decent amount of these games. He early in the year was playing sizable minutes. Is there something that happened in terms of a new personnel change, or is this just a change of his minutes have kind of dissipated late in the year?
They have. I don't think it's related to fouls. He's had one foul in each of the last 2 games. He actually wasn't even very inefficient from the floor in their second most recent game. He went 2 of 2 shooting. He did have 2 turnovers, but in their last game, he had no turnovers. I legitimately think it's just a role change for him.
Yeah, it's weird because, I didn't watch a ton of them this year. I just happened to catch the games against Drake, and that was his time to shine. He played major minutes in those games, and since then it hasn't been good. But anything else from this side, or is this a pretty all in all? I mean, it's an easy team to break down just because they're so slow. They don't use a ton of personnel, in my opinion.
I think you could, like the Arkansas game, hit Loyola live if they go down early in this game. I do think they win it. They hold significant advantages over Oregon State. Rebounding, 3 points. I think that's where it goes, but I'd want to get a better line than 7.
On the other side, a team that, again, I don't think a lot of people were thinking about. Why would you? They had to win the Pac-12 tournament just to get here. Crushed Tennessee, won handily against Oklahoma State. They've done everything that you possibly could to this point, and really, I mean, Cade Cunningham was 6 of 20 in that game. A lot of positives, and you mentioned Thompson, 7,200, but similar to what we talked about, I mean, we didn't think this was going to happen with Ayo. Is it just such a bad spot to go against this team? Can you even pay that tag?
Maybe in the biggest of tournaments, but we're talking about a team implied for 59 points. So there is good usage with Ethan Thompson, 20% shot rate, almost a 20% rebound rate, and a 24% assist rate. So he's a do-it-all player, but we've seen him get in foul trouble. The team total here is just egregiously low. Like, he had 4 fouls in their last game. He still scored 26 points, so just fantastic for Ethan Thompson. But at the same time, he carries just so much risk here. I'm not sure you can get to him.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, this was just, he was 15 of 16 from the line against Oklahoma State. Loyola does a great job of not fouling. I don't see that happening. So he's going to have to get going from the floor. And again, this is just the same problem with this game. It's really not much to say. 2 6K players for Oregon State. Are they in the same situation, or are they more playable?
You're buying high on them right now. So they've played very well in their early games during the tournament this year. We're talking about Jared Lucas and Reef Alistise, who gets in foul trouble almost every single game. So he's certainly not somebody I'm looking at. He'll also be battling Krutwig on the interior. Lucas has a great shot rate, so he's going to be entirely dependent on that. 18% shot rate for him. His other peripheral statistics leave quite a bit to be desired. And we just mentioned Loyola, a great 3-point defending team. They don't let teams shoot a ton of threes, and we're already looking at a 59 total. So his player prop is actually one I was looking to bet under on. I saw him around 12 points, had him projected just shy of 10.
Working down, some reasonable price guys. You got Silva and then the cheapies here. Is there any warranted, not a game you're going to be looking to stack up or anything, but as the last man in, can you try to save some salary with anyone in Oregon State?
Probably not. So Silva, he's interesting because he's had a role change. He's playing a lot more minutes. He still is dependent on not fouling, and he's another one of these guys that really struggles to keep his hands to himself. But guys like Gianni Hunt, Andela, Tucker, none of them play significant minutes. You're maxing out maybe at 15 with those guys, so it's really tough to get to them. Oregon State is kind of priced out of consideration for me.
So looking at the game, clearly on the DFS side, we don't have a ton to talk about here. But the betting side, 7 points in a game with a 125 total is a pretty sizable clip to me. I mean, you've mentioned that Loyola can really put a strain on how you can produce from the outside. Is there a way that you think Oregon State can win the game? And if they do, what exactly do you think they would do?
Ethan Thompson has a pretty decent size advantage. Loyola plays some really small guards. I don't think this really matters in this game. We saw Loyola defend Ayo Dosunmu, who's another big size guard last week, very well. It was maybe Ayo's worst game of the entire year. So I think they can do the same thing to Ethan Thompson. But if this Oregon State team does win, I think it's through him being a size mismatch.
Is there anything, I mean, again, we're going kind of into the more personnel base, and this isn't relevant for DFS, but do you expect Oregon State to try to throw anything weird at them in terms of zone them or press them? Or, I mean, they don't really want to speed the game up because they're very slow as well. Or do you think this is a game where you just have two teams kind of play to their strengths and see what happens?
I think it's going to be more that it's just a really ugly game overall. And there's a lot of regression baked into Oregon State right now. Shooting from 3, rebounding. We didn't even talk about free throws. They went 32 of 35 against Oklahoma State. So it's all going to be really tough for Oregon State here. But at the same time, when you look at betting the game, are you willing to lay 7 points in a game with a 125 total? It's a lot of points.
So I bet this game. I bet Oregon State. It was for that. I'm not trying to hedge out of it. Ultimately, I think Loyola has a very good shot to win the game. When you're talking 7 points in a game like this, I think this will be a competitive game. I think the under is, if I had to bet a total, I would probably lean under. If the game is in the 50s, I'll take my points. I think I'll have opportunities to buy out if I need to, but I feel pretty good that Oregon State, they're not going to whip them on the boards, but I think they will be very competitive there. And if the game really crawls, it could be ugly. I know Loyola is great, but their regular season, they shouldn't have been an 8, but the team that beat Illinois, I don't know. I didn't see that during the year too often. So it's not to say I even saw Oregon State. I'm going to lean with the Beavers, though. This is one of the games I've already placed.
Yeah, I'm going to wait and see if I can't get something live.
And there's no real, I mean, with player props here, you'd be looking mostly to short players, I assume, right?
Yeah, none of the props really stood out to me. They were pretty efficient compared to, the Arkansas. They were very, very much off. And there's some bad ones in the next game we'll talk about too.
Yeah, see, zone them. That's right. Throw the weird Georgia Tech zone. Why not? Maybe they can get an immediate waiver for Moses Wright. Then we'll be off to the races. All right, let's get to this last game. Then we're going to circle back for sure. We're going to get to our favorite DFS plays, the lock of the day. Hopefully we can keep that going. Before I do, chat, a lot of people in here on a Saturday, and that's very exciting. If you can hit that like button for us, we really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. I just mentioned baseball is starting. Golf, the Masters is in like 10 days. I know hopefully someone's got some live lineups for the match play today. Hole-in-ones all over the place. Hit that notification bell. You know when we go live. We've got so much content here. We want to make sure that you guys do not miss it. And if you have any questions, you can hit us up on Twitter at JazzRazDFS, at Matt_Gajewski. Why not? It's good for the community. It's good for the karma train. That's what we all need. All right, last game of the day. We've got Houston. We've got Cuse. Houston's 6.5-point favorite. We're going to get there. 141 total. This is a team that, I mean, they should have probably lost to Rutgers, which is not a great thing. I still do like Houston in the spot, though, and I want to start there and start with Grimes. He's 7,900. What do you make of that spot, and where does he, on a 4-game slate, we have to play the comparison game. Where does he fall in line with the other upper-tiered players?
Yeah, he's pretty high up there. I like him. He's about 1,000 cheaper than O'Banner, close to that when you compare him to Asmus. So this is the range I'm trying to find myself with Butler and Moody and Smith and Quentin Grimes. And his usage rate is fantastic. 21% usage, 21.5% shot rate. He's going to take a ton of threes. That's how you beat Syracuse. So he matches up really well, firmly in consideration for me. So I like Grimes a bit.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you mentioned it. I'm still bitter that San Diego State had about 60 looks from 3 and they hit 2 of them. And that's not the answer. We know how you can beat the zone. You just have to do it. What is the status of Giroux here at 6,500?
We got some really positive news on him this week. So I already thought they were not taking him into consideration enough in the betting markets, considering he played 1 minute in the Cleveland State game, obviously aggravated the hip. They didn't need him in that game. I think it was fine to sit him out. And then coming into the Rutgers game, there's a lot of concern about him, but he ends up gutting through the injury and playing 32 minutes. That was on 2 days rest, obviously. Now they've had nearly a full week. He was healthy enough to even return to practice. So it seems like it's all systems go for Giroux. And if that's the case, he's underpriced in DFS. This spread is off in the betting markets, and I'm backing Houston already.
Do you think that, I mean, again, ownership is always very difficult in situations like this, but him sporting the Q tag may suppress that ownership even further?
Yeah, 100%. I think he'll come in under-owned, and that's a leverage spot on the slate.
Yeah. And with only 4 games, certainly you don't have the luxury of picking a ton of leverage. You got to take it where you can find it. Looking at Sasser, 5,800, awful shooting performance against Rutgers. I mean, just disturbing. Set everybody back. What do you make of this? I mean, the minutes could be elevated here. He only played 26 minutes. They should have pulled him off the court earlier. Where does he go at 5,800?
Yeah, I think Sasser's fine. He's a buy low for that reason. So he went 1 of 9 shooting, to give that some context. Just a downright horrific performance, 0-5 from 3. But he's typically a 30-minute per game type player. He's going to shoot the ball a ton. That's his best asset. So with that comes a large ceiling. Sasser's not expensive. If you want to get to him, I have absolutely no qualms with that.
After that, I mean, naturally, the pricing continues to drop because I'm going in order. Is there anyone else, more on the value side for Houston that you think could be effective?
On Houston for value, I do think there is one very good play, and there's a couple decent ancillary plays. So Justin Gorham is 5,500 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. He's been in foul trouble in all of their recent games. He's played 24, 21, and 22 minutes. But before that, he was consistently playing above 30. And we talked about Syracuse having a weakness against three-point shooting. They also have a strong weakness against rebounding. Gorham is their tallest starter on this team. Syracuse is outside the top 300 in defensive rebounding. And it just so happens that Houston's a top 3 offensive rebounding team in the country. So he sets up as a very strong buy low. Then if you want to look at guys like Tremont Mack, he's played pretty consistent minutes. Fabian White's going to get around 20 minutes. They're not as attractive, but I do think they're in play in huge GPPs.
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, just to kind of close out the Houston situation, you think they'll just simply beat the zone over the top, or do you think they have a massive rebounding edge? How do you see them really getting to Cuse here?
Yeah, both, honestly. Houston's a great three-point shooting team. I mean, Sasser, he shoots well from three, typically outside of the last game. So if you just look at their individual personnel, they shoot 35.8% from three. That's top 100 in the country. They take a ton of threes. Grimes is shooting 41.7%. Giroux is shooting 37%. Sasser's going to shoot better than 1 for 9 on most occasions.
I would hope.
Yeah, so that's a huge advantage. And then we briefly mentioned the rebounding, but Syracuse gives up a ton of boards, and that's Houston's strength. I saw someone bring this up in the chat that it's not a great rebounding conference. That's true, but Houston's gotten it done in both of their games so far in the tournament, which bodes well. And every time they've faced solid competition, they've still been able to grab offensive boards. So it's just too overpowering, I think, against this zone. Houston's also faced a ton of zone play this year, which bodes well here.
Yeah, I mean, clearly did not play well against Rutgers, but you know what? They survived. They advanced. They always pull. That game against Michigan will be forever burned in my memory. But yeah, I think they have an absolute advantage in both the situations that we talked about. We had a question for chat before we flip it over to the Q side. Giroux or better than Butler for GPP purposes, or would you go with the safer side with the Baylor player?
I would play Butler. They're not the same price, but Butler projects better.
All right. Now, I mentioned you have a free article, and it's always nice I did bet one player prop, and then I read your article, and it was in there, and that always makes me feel good. And it is the man leading Syracuse, Buddy Boeheim, who is now $8,100. He has been shooting out of his mind. He has 13 threes in the 2 games. He's 13 for 23 from 3-point range. If he continues like this, he'll probably be the first pick in the draft somehow. That's the trajectory that we're going here. But I assume Houston, who is an absolutely fantastic defense, particularly at stopping the three, they are 12th in the country, 29%, can figure out a way to stop Buddy Boeheim.
Yeah, so you mentioned the matchup nightmare for Buddy Boeheim. Then we can just talk about simple regression. Buddy Boeheim, he's a great three-point shooter on the year. He's shooting over 35% from three. It's fantastic. But he shot 55% since the start of their conference tournament and into the NCAA tournament. That is going to regress at some point. Buddy Boeheim is not a 55% three-point shooter in his career. Now he draws just an incredibly difficult matchup. You mentioned the player prop, so you can find this all over the board. Last night on DraftKings, it was at 22.5 points. My projections had him at 15.9. I've seen it pretty consistently at 20.5 around various sports books. Anything above 20, I'm just smashing the under on Buddy Boeheim.
Correct. I got it at 20.5. I feel very comfortable there. Yes. Listen, he's an incredible shooter, but he's not, nor is anybody, 55% from three. And there's just no real way. I don't expect him to get to the line much. And I don't think without that, and we can really extend it to the rest of the team. It's a simple question, I guess. Do you think Syracuse can survive in this game if they're not effective from 3-point range?
No, I don't.
I would agree. And I don't think they will be. But let's talk about their other players. Who else? I'll kind of just open it up. I know we've been going in order, but floor is yours. Outside of Boeheim, is there anyone on Syracuse that you think is a good target against Houston?
Not really. The Syracuse team has changed a lot this year. Early in the season, they were playing 5 players, and that was it. They've expanded their rotation quite a bit now. I think you could maybe look at Guerrier. He has a decent combination of shot rate and rebound rate in their last 3, but he's still $7K. So you have a little bit of opportunity cost there with just some of the Arkansas players in that range. Alan Griffin's not being used anymore, so he's completely out of play. Marek Dolezaj is just not very involved. He has an 11% usage rate on the year, so 6,200 for him doesn't make a ton of sense. And then you get down to Joseph Girard. He hasn't played 30 minutes anytime recently. He's been at 29 the last 2 games, and he shoots a ton. Maybe you can look to him as just a pure shooter, but I think he's thin. And then Robert Broswell, his rates leave a lot to be desired as well. He's played 29, 25, and 27 minutes last 3, but he has contributed 0 assists in that span. He has just a 10% shot rate and a 7% rebound rate. So all of them leave quite a bit to be desired.
I'm looking at this guy's name, John Bol Ajak. That's quite a name. Don't play him. I always have to, while you're rattling it off, I go to the depths to see if there's any people with baller names. Because that's what I do. Is there anyone, I mean, I've been asking this question and the answer's been a resounding no. Seems like it's no here. There's no one on Syracuse who's extremely cheap that you think could really be playable, right?
I don't think so. If there was, it'd be Broswell, but he's just not doing anything on the court. He's just standing there and doing wind sprints.
Yeah, that's not super effective. You don't have wind sprint bonuses. Other than that, let's get to the betting side of this game. I mentioned I already bet Houston. I believe you have as well.
I have like 4 bets. I bet Houston. I bet Houston first half. I bet the under.
Ooh, the under. Okay, let's talk about that. Is that more because you think that will correlate well, like with a Syracuse team total under, in the sense that you think it's probably coming from them, the lack of points?
Yes, and Syracuse. So Houston already plays really slow. They're a very slow team. They're going to try to slow the pace. But Syracuse, they've slowed their pace recently too. So outside of just, West Virginia, and you know what West Virginia does. Every time they play, they're just getting in straight track meets. So removing that game, they haven't been above 70 possessions in any of their last 5 games, which is notable to me. Syracuse during their winning streak has played a bit slower here, which also points to the under.
Yeah, and I mean, Syracuse just in general, it's just been insane how well they've been shooting. You know, they shoot for the year, just to give some context, they're a decent 3-point shooting team, 97th in the country, 35.3%. In the last 3 games, they're up to 46.2%. That is really crazy stuff. So up there with USC, sure, why not? That talk about making no sense. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Obviously, tomorrow, me and Matt are going to be back breaking down the 4 other games. But in this one, so you really think anything Houston related is kind of how you're approaching the betting market?
I am. I think they're underpriced. When I ran my model, it gave me Houston -8. Look towards the under. So I think both of those are strong plays.
I like it. All right, let's circle back. We've got about 10 minutes left here, which is good because we've got some time. We're going to kind of just do some brief recap, and we'll get to our locker of the day. If there's a couple questions in chat, we'll be happy to take them. I actually want to take one now on the DFS side for you. Fashion Athlete. It's a pretty good name. Anyone on Flager as a potential value play for Baylor?
Wait, can you say that question again? Sorry.
Flager. I'm probably butchering the name.
No? I actually bet the under on one of his props. He's going to be a 20 per minute type player. His prop was 9.5 points, so I bet the under on it. But if you're looking at him at 4.2, I think you just want to pay up a little bit more and get somebody like Jalen Williams at 4.9, or look in that range where you can get some more consistency.
So like I said, for this slate, I've looked at it. How low do you think you can go? Ultimately, we're encapsulating the 4 games here, just on the DFS side. Is there anyone on the entire slate that is less than 4K that is playable?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The only player that we could maybe talk about is Uguak because of his previous role, but he just hasn't been playing that role recently, so I'm not even willing to get to him.
And so, I mean, I guess with only 4 games, though, you know, it's the opportunity. When Luka Garza was on the slate, or Cunningham, or one of those, you know, you had mentioned, like, for example, you wanted to get value with Grand Canyon or something like that to open it up so you could pay up potentially for stars and scrubs. Here, there is no one above, you know, the 2 Oral Roberts players are 89 and 8,700. So there's not exactly stars that you're paying a massive premium for. Does that change kind of how you want to approach the build type in terms of balance versus kind of paying all the way up?
Yeah, I think the slate, like you mentioned, sets up not for a stars and scrubs approach, but more of taking the middling value and the middling studs. So players like Jared Butler, who's only 7,400. You have the 2 Arkansas studs at 77 and 78, all fantastic plays there. And even if you want to go a little cheaper, like Giroux, Note, they're all sitting in that range too. The ancillary Baylor pieces. if you play those guys, multiple of them, you don't have to go all the way down to 3K. You can actually play some of the middling value here as well, which also has very strong projections. So that's where I'm leaning in DFS.
And then in terms of, I mean, I think this is pretty obvious, just kind of taking the games on their own. The Loyola game, I mean, I'm not breaking any news here, would clearly be the worst game in terms of stackability. And it seems like Oral Roberts in Arkansas would be the clear one to really load up on.
That's true.
Yeah. And then looking at that, I mean, you know, we've talked going all the way back, like North Carolina football, where it's like, you know, correlation certainly not as important, where you're just stacking up a whole team. But on a 4-game slate like this in big field tournaments, do you see some merit to taking, you know, if you're playing a lot of lineups, taking O'Banner and Asmus and then running it back with multiple Arkansas guys and like trying to go cheap across the board, or is that just too aggressive?
I think you could do that with that game. The total is just so much better than some of the other games. As far as Asmus and O'Banner goes, that's going to leave you extremely thin. And those players are both taking a ton of shots. So I would rather do something like Asmus and Jurgens or O'Banner and Jurgens, really take someone that has an elevated assist rate and gets there in the periphery that's not as expensive. So that way you can still access some of the studs in the other game. You're not dealing with as much opportunity cost because those players play a little bit better together, if that makes sense.
I know that. I mean, I think that is the way to approach it. Basically, you're still getting various points of exposure in the best game, but the total, you know, people sometimes talk about how many players you want from a game, but it's more the allocation of salary. Like you could have 3 players from a game if they're all 4K and it's not that big of a hit. But if you're taking, that's just a lot of production, a lot of salary if you're loading up on the top tier players. And I think you're misguided if you do it that way. Just because the pivots in the other 3 games, I don't think there's enough there, but that's how I would approach it. More importantly for me is the next segment, our final segment, lock of the day. We've been good here. We've been in lockstep. Today we're a little against the grain, but I still think at the end of the day, we've got what we want. I'm going to say it first. So if they win, I get more credit than you. I like Houston. I think they roll Syracuse. This run is coming to an end. They have the advantage on both sides. Their 3-point shooting should be effective against the 2-3 zone, and they do a great job naturally of shutting down teams that want to shoot threes. They should dominate on the boards. What's there to say? 6.5. I feel very comfortable Houston wins the game going away. What say you?
I love that bet. That's the bet I've already taken like 3-4 times. So we're in lockstep, at least on our bet of the day. Some of the other spots, I think we were a little bit different. You bet Oral Roberts, I bet Arkansas. And like I said, I kind of regretted that and wish I had waited to hit Arkansas live just with their propensity to go down in games early. But ultimately, I still like them against the spread. Nova Baylor, I think, is pretty efficient, as well as Loyola versus Oregon State.
I'm with you. The Villanova Baylor game to me is the toughest. Maybe I see something in there, but ultimately it feels like Baylor will get it done just because they have too much talent, despite what I think are serious flaws in the coaching. Not to take a shot at the coach. Sorry. I know, Scott, probably watching the show. If you could hit the like button, my friend, before your game. Oregon State, I felt comfortable enough to take them, and it's just a product of a 125 total. I think 7 points in a game like that will be enough. I'm not going to say it's a toss-up outcome, but I think more often than not, it's a very competitive game. And when you're playing in the 50s, that can just be more than enough points there. Okie S, is 2 Houston players too many? And you said no.
No, I don't think so. A couple of them are just underpriced. Giroux is typically above 7K. You're getting him at 6.5, a little bit of an injury discount. As far as Gorham goes, you're getting a foul discount for him. He's typically going to play 30 minutes, and now he's priced down at 5.5K, and he draws the best matchup on the boards against Syracuse. So love that as well.
So maybe the most important question, we're going off the reservation here, but I just wanted to ask you, on a day like today with so much going on, what do you like? Do you watch do the NCAA games take control? Do you watch the MMA stuff? How do you prioritize what is on your now purchased TV?
Hey, how'd you know that I got a TV?
You showed it to me.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's very nice. I'm not going to lie.
Today, I'm actually watching with my buddy, Steve Boyton. So we're going to watch everything college basketball. Yeah, Steve in the chat, shout out to you. We're watching some of the games today. If I'm by myself, I just flip back and forth between it all.
Thanks for the invite, fellas. That hurts.
Come to the Midwest, Ben.
Yeah,
we're always willing to have you.
Yeah, I mean, and hypothetical last question. This is a good one, and certainly these games. We will have a show tomorrow, the 4 games. for the two games, me and Matt, we may not have a show, but we will have content, articles breaking down the player props. I think are going to become more important. But we had a question, just if we got Loyola and Houston, you don't need to go in depth, but what would you think about a game like that?
It's going to be another really low total game because they both play slow. I think you're probably going to get a little bit of a line edge on Houston, whatever that opens up at. We've seen Houston discounted after their first two games, unless they completely roll.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, unless they completely roll today, I think you probably get Houston at a discounted line.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Certainly Loyola is taking, and again, this is why I bet Oregon State. I think the pendulum has swung a little much, and most impressive win of the tournament, no doubt. But let's see what they can do today. I have bet curling before many a times. The Olympics is coming up, and I will have bets. We've got everything you need here. As we've talked about, MMA tonight. The guys will have you covered. World Cup qualifiers, I will be betting a little of those. All of these things will be in Slack. So if you want to have some fun and you want to get in there, there's no reason not to. We have a blast, and I know you would too. So on that note, we're going to bounce on out of here, but good luck. You guys have a blast doing your thing. Chat, have a blast. Enjoy these games. If anyone has questions, hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up in Slack. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place for another 4-game slate.